Hello, this is Arthur Melman welcoming you to another segment of GGG Insights. And our topic this time, once again, is the future of East Hampton, the opportunities, the challenges, and the problems. And today we're very fortunate to have Reverend Ryan, who is the Reverend at Most Holy Trinity. He's been here, I guess he said, a year and a half.
A year and a half, yes.
And where were you before this?
I was in St. Agnes Cathedral in Rockville Center, and then was appointed the pastor here. And
how is the community here, in your view, of 18 months or so, different from Rockville Center?
It's interesting. It's different in that it's less busy, but there's still a lot of work that we can do. I grew up with summers in Amagansett, so I'm not a stranger to the
okay.
neighborhood. But I'm no longer on vacation. I am now working, and it's the same dynamic in the responsibilities which I have in my office. So the community is very important, and it's very demanding in a good way, in that it does really challenge the responsibilities that are capable of someone who wants to hopefully know what they're doing, you know? So that's how I would describe it.
Well, one of the things that we've talked about on a lot of these segments is the challenges of integrating a very large and very industrious and very successful Latino population into East Hampton in its civic sense, and also, obviously, from your perspective, the religious sense. I mean, I think we're all very proud of the fact that the valedictorian and the salutatorian at East Hampton High School this year were both part of the Latino community. What are some of the challenges you find at the church?
In the church, we luckily don't have any cases of prejudice. So that's one thing we can scratch off, I would say.
That's terrific.
That was my first priority when I arrived, was to make sure that I said a mass in Spanish for the community, because the previous pastors had didn't speak Spanish well enough, I suppose. But when it came to the integration of the community, the real push was for bringing people into each of the different devotions that we have and things like that. We're coming up on the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and it's a really great feast because she's the patroness of all of the Americas. The thing is, the songs and the devotions start at about 5 o'clock in the morning on December 12th.
I'm engaged on December 12th. I may be there at 5:30 or 6 o'clock.
And how's your Spanish?
Muy bien.
Excelente. And so the incorporation of the community is as one is very important. It has been a priority, and things have gone very well in my year and a half from what the feedback has told me. So that's that. But we obviously still are looking at a shift in the way families are composed and everything like that. It's going well.
And a lot of denominations across the country have had a loss of young people. For whatever reason, what is your own experience? How are young people as involved with the church as they were, say, 20 years ago?
No, they're not, especially in our area in the Northeast. And there's a lot of factors involved. The cost of living is what's part of it. A lot of us go away. You know, my generation, I'm only 34. I like to say only, and I'll probably be saying that for a while.
I was going to say I was double your age, but I'm more than that, so I better be careful.
But we we go to school elsewhere, and we can't move back home until we really have a sound base. And so it's tough when it comes to the areas that are established for young people. Mm-hmm. So the church tries to draw in and teach, you know, elementary school children, high school children. We impart the faith and civic service and responsibility to your calling as a resident of wherever you are is very much a part of that. But when you create a great machine and then you lose them as they go out somewhere else, mm-hmm. it's kind of a beautiful tragedy, I have to say, you know. But that's the case. The decline is one which can only be resolved by continued cooperation and solidarity with each other, mm-hmm. so that we're able to aid each other to allow for one to come back to where their home was and aid it.
Mm-hmm. No, it's funny. It in a lot of these segments, we're always coming back to virtually the same problem, that young people can't afford to live here because they can't afford to buy a home and possibly not even rent a home, and it's very discouraging, really. Mm-hmm. So I know, as a father and a grandfather, you like to have the kids around. Maybe you don't like to have them in the kitchen 24/7, right. But you certainly like to have them within grabbing distance and hugging distance.
Yeah.
What particular objectives do you have for your church for the next, 5 years or so, 10 years?
For 5 or 10 years, it's important for us to make sure that, first of all, we have old buildings. Mm-hmm. And my predecessor, Father Hampton, took care of a lot of that work. So we want to make sure no roofs will be falling in. But the other thing is continued growth and the maintenance of the outreach to the community for different things.
By the way, I won't interrupt you, but one of the things I think that you folks do, I guess it's the clericus effectively, but that's that Wednesday night soup night.
Oh yes, yeah.
I mean, I've been there, and it's just fantastic.
Right, that's the perfect example. The cooperation with all of the other houses of worship is another priority for my parish, and I'm the only priest there, so I'm the one who has to do it.
You always get
great fervor.
Unanimous approval.
Right. So yeah, the cooperation of the clericus group, and it stretches from Montauk to Wainscott, and we are able to address issues and things like that. That's very important because everybody's living together, and everybody knows each other. So we know this much. So we're able to get a lot of work done, whether it's advocacy or actually, looking at funding of different things and all of that, and personally as well.
Now, how about, on the other hand, you mentioned engaging people with the church. One of the problems, which I think we have, in fact I know we have in East Hampton, is a lot of the Latino population is hardworking. Their kids are going to college. They're terrific neighbors. But they really haven't, and I guess maybe it's because they're working too hard, had a chance to get involved in some of the civic aspects of the community, and most basically really don't vote as much as we hoped that they would, forgetting who they vote for.
Right.
That's not relevant. It's getting out and voting. And I remember I spoke to a lady at the who was behind the counter in the post office. So she was absolutely here legally. There was no problem there. But one of the things that was so sad to hear her say was, even though she was registered to vote, she didn't. and because in her home country, your vote didn't matter, and if you voted the wrong way, your house may have a fire the next day. And do you encounter any of this type of feeling here? And how did we overcome that? Because I hate to say it so bluntly, but if you're a politician and you know there's a whole group that really goes out and votes, you pay a lot of attention to them.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that's the case, you don't pay as much attention to them.
Right. Certainly, teaching the idea that voting is a civic virtue is very important. I remember as a kid, my parents, schlepping off to the school. That's
an old Catholic word. I hadn't heard it. I hadn't heard it from. It's Latin. Okay. To schlep. Okay. Schleppare.
And they had the sense of duty because they didn't like any of the candidates.
Right.
And but they knew they had to go. And it's important to teach to the upcoming people, and as we say, a lot of people who are immigrants, whether it's Latino or Polish or anything like that, we absolutely have got to show that it's important to put your voice into the system and make these things known. And it's part of what one's responsibility is. It's a moral responsibility in that case.
We talk a lot about the Latino community, but there's also the community of people who have been here for generations. And what are some of the problems you find in your parish, at least, that those folks are experiencing? Or what opportunities are they're lacking besides a decent job?
Right. Everyone is who's able-bodied, I guess we could say, is okay, and they experience the same ups and downs that the rest of Americans that we hear about on the news would experience. For us, it's the elderly who require a lot of care. And we do have a lot of people that are homebound and who need to be attended to, not simply financially, but also with some sort of contact.
Human contact.
Exactly, with the rest of the world. And in the church, we do the best we can with numerous, projects. The biggest one we have is the homebound ministry. And that's where they deliver communion if needed, and say prayers with them and simply spend time with them. They build pretty interesting friendships, but the elderly are a very important aspect of the community that has to be addressed, I would say.
Well, my father passed away recently in his sleep in his own home at 100.5. And my mother's 100th birthday is in June. So I've had a little more experience than I had ever had before with the elderly. And this sort of leads me into something else, and that is, as you may or may not be aware, the town is looking to rebuild the senior center on Springs Fireplace Road. And it's a place where elderly people could come and get lunch, they can do certain activities. There's a bus that goes around and picks people up to bring them there for those who can't drive. And there are those folks who think, well, let's make it a little bigger than it is today as we remodel it or rebuild it. And there's another group that says, no, we should really address the elderly problem in a much larger facility physically, but in a much larger view, starting with I'll call the young elderly. The folks that are retired but go out and can play tennis, golf, swim for an hour or something like that. And again, this may sound like a funny idea, but the town is in the process, and it just probably, maybe it may have finished already, buying a facility on Daniels Hole Road, which was an old school. It's about 24,000 square feet. And the next question is, what should the town do with this? It wants to make it available in some respects, if not all respects, for nonprofits, not-for-profits. And so there's Project MOST, which you may be familiar with, which is the project for the kids. There are some arts groups. There's also a group of elderly folks or senior citizens who say, well, that should be a senior citizens center. And the question comes up, and I'm just curious for your take on this. Obviously, Project MOST, for example, picks up kids after school, 3 o'clock.
Yeah, yeah.
And from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock, there's really nobody who needs the facility. If Project MOST is there, obviously the elderly, the more vigorous elderly certainly, can jump in the car and come to a workout class at 8 o'clock. Probably not 7 o'clock in the morning for one of your masses, but, but by 8. But then there's the end of the day. What would be your thoughts about inviting some of those older or younger older people to interact with the Project MOST kids? Because the Project MOST is got a lot of different aspects to it. You know, it's recreational, it's learning, it's mentoring, and you know, I've heard pros and cons, but you know, you've really experienced the interaction of older people and younger people. Would this be an opportunity maybe to get some of those people who have a lot to offer, and hopefully the patients to hook up with some of these kids, or am I just?
It's a very. It sounds like a very charitable endeavor, because we would have to vet the seniors carefully.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you know how cranky people can be.
I can't imagine. I mean, remember, not only do I know my own parents, I know the people who were in the nursing home with my mother.
Right.
And I know the people who were in the house with my father. So
well,
no,
you see, it's funny because I went to public school, and we had this program where there were, you know, very carefully vetted seniors that came, and it was Grandma Ann and Grandma May and all of that helped out, sort of like aides in the classroom.
Sure.
And they had a great time. They were very helpful and all of that. But sometimes when there was a difficult math problem, this one Grandma Ann said, "Oh shoot, I can't help you, honey." And so we, I mean, that sort of thing is good. I mean, I would say would be very facilitative to the project that MOST is, you know, working on, and it is a good idea. The unity of the service is very important for the town that we are. You know, we don't close up when the summer ends. We are very much alive and working when it comes to daily life. So I think it is a good thing.
Yeah, I guess
a fascinating project.
Yeah, well, I've always had this feeling that if you don't try something, you can't realize whether it will work or not. And whatever you try, it's not going to work perfectly when you start. You're going to go through some hiccups, hopefully not screams of terror. Right. But this sort of intrigued me of having some of the senior citizens who are properly vetted be kept after school, literally, to interact with the young people. Because I know in my own family, when I told my kids they shouldn't do something or they should never again do something that they just did, the answer was always, well, you won't tell Grandma, will you? You know? Okay. I mean, it was a very interesting dynamic between the older folks and the younger folks. But so
I don't want to make it sound offensive to say properly vetted, but you know, those who are able and healthy enough and all that. So have to be, I don't want to get in trouble.
No, you can't get in trouble because you know, if somebody were concerned about that, and they were so. Maybe they shouldn't be in the program,
Right.
because it's a hard word. Maybe we can find a better way of saying it, but it's really what we have to be careful of. We don't want kids who could get turned off by a person who doesn't have patience. It takes a tremendous amount of patience. I mean, again, having 8 grandchildren, I know how easy it is to want to wring somebody's neck, and I don't think we want to have that happen too often.
Precisely.
And as you say, math has changed over the years, but it takes a tremendous amount of patience to sit and read with somebody, which is a terrific opportunity for both if it works out well.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, this may sound, again, I'm really not that familiar with how you operate, but is there a daycare facility that you folks have? I mean, for the little kids, or?
No, not right now. The SCOPE program is now in Springs. We did facilitate it at the school building, but we don't have that right now. No.
Because I mean, except for Eleanor Whitmore, I don't think there's a really. I guess the school now has pre-K, but
Exactly,
I mean the real little ones, the kids who are 3 months up to about 3 or 4 years, because that seems to be something missing in the town.
Right.
And it makes it very difficult for a mom or a dad, for that matter,
Exactly.
to work a full day.
And that's where there's a certain dearth is in qualified personnel.
Yeah, no, it's easy to say, well, we'll just have 10 people come, but then you have to check all the boxes.
Right.
And is the facility appropriate and things like that.
Yeah.
So
and are the people appropriate? You know.
Oh, sure.
Qualified.
I mean,
like
qualified.
Again, to
well,
vetting.
Vetted. Vetted. Well, now it's great, because now we're using vetted for a young person as well as an old person. But what are some of the opportunities you see here going forward, besides making sure your roof doesn't leak, and what do you think we could be doing as a community that we're not?
For me, as I was thinking about it over the last year, the most important thing is to have continued communication between all the organizations and all of the different aspects we have of life. The VFW, the Lions, they've got events, and I've been to, I don't know how many Christmas trees I've seen lit up, and how many memorial services on Memorial Day and everything. The Clericus events. Everyone needs to work together so that we keep the town vibrant and are able to collaborate and do what is necessary and respond to challenges. You can make a mission statement and say, you know, X, Y, and Z, but tomorrow things might be different. And we've got to make sure the communication is open, that everyone is working together. I think that's a very important way of seeing how a town like this works, because I've come from big ones, and
Rockville Center was obviously a pretty big.
Yes, exactly. And they did a good job, but that was entrenched. And you have to be careful in East Hampton, because we have such a shift in the seasons and all of that. And it's, I remember I studied in Washington, D.C., so there's a town that'll change in
dramatically.
Yeah, exactly. And so the most important thing as we go forward is communication and openness, I would say. Constant collaboration.
You know, it's funny. I mean, obviously the Clericus is a group that I know collaborates very well, but I hadn't really thought of the fact that there are all these other groups marching to their own drummers and probably recreating the wheel many times. And I hadn't even thought of the fact there's no overarching association here at East Hampton.
The funny thing is that the membership of all the different groups overlaps
with
a few people,
right.
you know. So it's just always good for everyone to be in communication and talking with each other. It's really important, and that's why. And I see it at the parish. because someone's in this group, someone's in that group, and when they're in church, they're chatting afterward about this and that, exchanging dates for one thing or another and everything. It's it's communication.
When you were in Rockville Center, which is obviously a bigger community than this, was there some formal organization that brought together all the nonprofits, or Kiwanis and all those things? Was there? How did they get together?
It was the town council, which was a battle royale, apparently. I never went to one of them.
In other words, it wasn't the political town council, but it was called the town council?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I see. That's something that's missing here. It doesn't exist.
Right.
So we don't know if people would war in it until we try it, I guess. Okay, well, that's...
As with all things, it can be rough in the beginning, and then you're able to,
smooth the edges.
Exactly. Boil off the dross.
Believe me, I've sat through committees and meetings of only 20 or 30 people, and sometimes, shall we say, there are personality clashes that have to be toned down. But
exactly.
it's sort of, I think it's a phenomenal idea, because it would really coordinate a lot of people who want to help different segments or different aspects of the community, not duplicate, and maybe just bring their forces better together. And I want to thank you. I see our time is running out. I know I'm going to see you on a Wednesday night for the good soup, and really look forward to it. And
no, it's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Very happy to talk with you.